Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. There is so much recruitment, assessment, promotion, and progression going on in the UK Fire and Rescue Service at this very minute. And if you've ever been through one of these promotional processes, you may have experienced the reality that there is a wide spectrum of how well they're carried out, how simple, fair, or even driven by any kind of data these assessments are. Someone said something really funny to me recently, that most interviews are two people sat opposite sides of the table, each hoping they don't get found out. Now, hopefully that's not been your experience, and that's not what we're trying to deliver for people that are looking for progression, promotion, or even to join the first responder sector. However, we're always walking that fine line of cost effectiveness, efficiency, and also what we should be looking for is finding the right people for the right job in the right place. So if you are preparing for promotion assessment, if you're joining the Fire and Rescue Service, if you want to know more about assessment exercises, written and role play, then this episode is going to be very useful. Today, my guest is Hannah Valance. She is a chartered occupational psychologist, and she runs a company called VCA Limited, who create bespoke online assessment tools to help Fire and Rescue Service, emergency services fairly and objectively recruit, promote, and develop their very best talent. They specialize in behavioral assessments in roles from firefighters all the way up to chief fire officers, including support staff, and they've been working in partnership with Fire and Rescue Service since 2002 to deliver simplified, fair, and data-driven assessments. As I've already alluded to, these things take a lot of time, a lot of money, and if you get them wrong, they can cause a lot of cultural damage, cause grievances, and Hannah's company recently saved over £34,000 for a single promotion process working with the Fire and Rescue Service in the UK. And you haven't got to go too far to imagine the cost of these things. If you're getting crew managers, watch managers, station, group, area, DACs, sub-officers, rider station officers, whatever it is your service needs, getting two or three of these people together, getting a representative of HR, all of the sifting and the process and the assessment and the feedback, it's expensive stuff. So today we're going to talk about how you can help identify talent, develop potential, and find leaders of the future in your Fire and Rescue Service. They measure applicants for recruitment, selection, and promotion using behavioral framework to identify leadership potential. Should you be forcing people to focus on their weaknesses? How should you be giving that feedback? If they don't hit the mark, how should we be delivering development? What does development look like? And also, how do you navigate those mentoring relationships? What does a good coach provide? And also, looking all the way at the other end of the spectrum, Hannah's company does a lot of work in preparing people for transitioning roles and looking for that next adventure in their professional career. So maybe you are coming up to retirement and looking for that next chapter in your professional life. This will be a useful episode. And following on, have a look in the notes. You'll find a link to VCA Limited and you'll find a LinkedIn link to Hannah herself. So there is lots to take away from today's episode. Having travelled up and down the country and seen a wide spectrum and heard the good, the bad, and the ugly from people who have been through these processes, when someone is not working with a company such as Hannah's, then you can very easily get into nepotism, you can get into an unfair process, not standardised, not giving fair, objective feedback in the moment that is reliable and specific and relevant to someone's development at that point in time. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you perhaps sit in one of these roles within a department, within an organisation, within a service or a brigade within the UK, this is a very, very useful one. A quick heads up, coming up on the podcast of the next few weeks, we've got some fantastic episodes. We have specialists on high-rise firefighting. We speak to a specialist in thermal imaging camera and author of Eurofighter. You can expect John Fletcher and the Manchester Arena bombing going into the depths of what happened there. And also we touch base with Brent Brooks, American high-rise specialist. So there's lots coming up. We don't usually give an insight into the episodes coming up, but I thought we'd do that today. Just in case you were wondering, when are we going to get back to some of the firefighting stuff? Well, it's all relevant, folks. Personal development, professional development has got to be wide as well as deep. And for those that are super passionate about the tactical aspects, about the frontline aspects, this is probably an area in today's episode that you probably need to work on. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope you take a lot away from it. And without further ado, please welcome my guest, occupational psychologist Hannah Valance. I'll see you on the other side. How would you describe what it is you do? Because on your LinkedIn, it says about being a chartered occupational psychologist. And then I read around creating bespoke online assessment tools and I was like, oh, this really interests me to understand how we think about how the brain works for the roles that we envisage ourselves doing.
So, yeah, that's a really good question because often people say, oh, yeah, I'm an occupational psychologist, but I sort of forget that that doesn't always mean an awful lot to a lot of people.
It's very impressive.
It's quite simple, really.
Know what it means.
So occupational psychology is about getting a good fit between an organisation and an individual. So it's making sure that the organisation can be as effective as it can be. So it's reaching its goals, it's performing in the way it should be. And a big part of that is in how its employees are working. And a massive part of that is making sure that people are happy at work, that they're using their strengths, that they feel supported, developed, and that they can be giving their very best. And it can get overlooked sometimes. You apply for a job that you might not be suited for, or if an organisation isn't very clear what it's looking for, it recruits people that aren't a good fit. And then that's just uncomfortable for everybody, for the individual who just doesn't feel like they're working to their full potential, they're not delivering what they could be, and for the organisation it's just not doing what it needs to do. So occupational psychology is about trying to get those pieces in place. But it's really important, for me particularly, I'm really passionate about making sure that people are happy at work, as content and satisfied as they can be. It's a massive chunk of all of our days. So to do something where you just don't feel quite like you're in the right place, or you're not appreciated, you're not recognised, you're not using your strengths, that just chips away at your morale. So we need to get those pieces right.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. Now, we all know the working environment of a firefighter is filled with challenges. We face serious risks on the job, such as heat exhaustion, burns, physical and mental stress, and we frequently come into contact with high levels of toxic chemicals. Now, I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together. What you were saying there screams so many things in my mind. Not interrupting is something I'm trying to get better at, but I always feel like a giddy child when I'm listening to my guests. So a few things I would love to double click and expand on there. I think I first heard the term occupational psychology when I was at my old job, where I did continuous improvement, because we obviously did all the Myers-Briggs, and we did the Strength Finder, we did Belbin. I'm sure these are all buzzwords from the sector that you're probably familiar with as well. And what I did like about them, and in my old job, for people that can't remember or don't know, it was fast-moving consumer goods. So we had a big operational side to the job, but there was then also obviously the office-style side to the job, if you will. And what I really liked about that model was you couldn't transition straight from one to another. And what I mean by that is someone that is a manager in the factory manages 30 people on shift. Again, lots of fast-moving parts, calculations, working through the night, lots of different skill sets that probably were required for that individual. They couldn't transfer from a shift manager on shift into the equivalent on days, and they were called, you probably know the terms better than me, we used to term them Bs. There was Bs and I think there were Bs and Ps. So you'd be like a B1, B2, B3, and that's the promotion scale. I think it was P1, P2, P3. And it was business versus practical or something like that. Whereas in government and in the fire service, and there's a question manifesting there, I promise, is we have a habit of switching people from like a watch manager. I'm a watch manager as an example. Take me off a fire engine or an operational, and then throw me into projects team, throw me into risk, throw me into whatever. And then I feel like, it's a bit like being really good at your hands and then going somewhere where someone seatbelts them to the side of your body or ties them behind your back. Is any of that making sense? And please help me piece together the waffle that I've just said around when we switch people into something just because it's the same level of pay but doesn't suit their skills.
Yeah, no, completely. And that's why it's so important to make sure that you're getting a really accurate assessment of where people's skills and competencies lie and their preferences and their motivations. Because often you might have somebody who, let's say someone's a crew manager and they're a brilliant crew manager. And it's just the natural progression. They get to a certain point in their career and they think, I'm going to be a watch manager. Or, they're looking ahead and thinking, I want to be a station manager. But they might actually be a brilliant crew manager, but they're they're not going to be a really good watch manager because the skills they've got really suit where they are now. But without a really proper, accurate assessment, it's really difficult to have those conversations, because if someone sort of set their mind on, no, I want to be the next level, and they do an assessment and they just get a no, and they don't really get any decent feedback, and they're not really clear why is it a no, that can be really demoralising. To actually sit down and have a conversation and say to them, well, we've done a really good assessment, and we can tell that what you're doing now, your skills are brilliantly fitting with what you're doing now. But actually, to move to the next level, you're going to have to do all these different things that you're showing no interest in. And that's going to be very difficult for you. So I do understand about, you want to stretch people and they need to meet their potential, but in the right way. And I think constantly moving people from pillar to post to develop their skills. So it's picking up on all their development needs, the things they're not so good on. I know some of them need to be expanded, but some of them you just think, right, you're in a team and there's people who love this stuff. So why spend a huge amount of time developing areas that you don't, if you're having to do, I don't know, budgeting or a load of finance stuff, it's just not your skill set. And you find that you're put into a role where you're having to do more and more of that. Well, actually, there's a whole load of other things that you are brilliant at. Why not develop those strengths more than developing the development needs? Because
I forget who it was.
There needs to be a balance. There are going to be some roles.
Was it Adam Grant's book, Think Again, where he talks about making your strengths stronger? We have a big thing, don't we, in culture about focus on your weaknesses. Sometimes, yes, I'm actively avoiding my quote-unquote weakness or development area. But sometimes, again, and this echoes a little bit into the neurodiversity aspect, perhaps, I'm never going to be like, it's the old, judging a fish's intelligence by its ability to climb a tree. It's not going to do that thing. Maybe it's not neurologically suited to it. But to challenge you on a couple of things there, like, I feel like what I'm hearing there is, I want to give you feedback maybe on some soft skills, sometimes on some hard skills. You're not good at spreadsheets, you're not good at the admin, whatever, hard skills. But if you are a manager, echo back to one of my first examples, you're a manager in charge of a large budget in assets, and you work with one other person who's your second in command, whatever it might be. You want to go to the next level, and that level is you're in charge of 40 or 50 people in a team. I'm going to have to give you feedback on your soft skills. I find that in the emergency services, and again, to zoom further into that niche of the fire service, we find it very difficult to give feedback formally for soft skills through the fear of what might happen. So, Hannah, I think you need to work more on building rapport with other people. Okay, Pete, everyone seems to like me though, so maybe it's just you've got a problem. How, and I know this is another area we're kind of delving into here, but like, that's difficult for people. We're trying to see the increase of things like 360 feedback and using tools like that, and they can be very effective. Very much in our infancy, I think. We're a long way behind other organizations, other sectors in our, I might term it emotional maturity without seeming condescending, because I by no means have got tremendous emotional intelligence. But do you know what I'm trying to say there? We struggle giving soft skills feedback. It's easy for me to say, Hannah, you just need a you need your IOSH. Go and get your IOSH qualification. You just need to do your incident command qualification. You just need to pass the fitness test. These are easy things, and I can do all of them. And then you still inside you might be going, yeah, Pete, but you're not what we're looking for because you haven't developed this. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, and there's so much wrapped up in that, because there's a lot of cultural things there. And I do actually write a lot about this when I'm writing feedback reports about assessment processes. I will often try and encourage people to, particularly managers, to start building a more positive feedback culture in their teams. And that includes encouraging other people to give you feedback. So not just waiting until you've got feedback that it's a telling off. And everyone feels like if someone says, oh, can I have a word? I've got some feedback. Oh, no one is overjoyed when they hear that. So it needs to be, feedback just needs to be something that is so embedded that it could be that you did that really well. That was really good. I really like the way you did that. You've got any feedback for me? Just building it into conversations every single day is encouraging that. Have you got any feedback for me on how I did that? because it just makes it so much easier for then you to give some feedback.
In other news, this episode is brought to you in partnership with MSA Safety. Today we have them to thank for the improved firefighter safety through connectivity in their brand new connected firefighter system. At the center of the connected firefighter platform is the MSA M1 SCBA with telemetry. You can view battery life, air pressure, and estimated time remaining either independently on the M1 itself or from the Luna connected device screen. Also, still with the air status, alarm information, search status, and all of this provided to the incident command for confident decision making during the scene. That integrates straight in with the Luna system, which is a wireless all-in-one device creating an independent search and rescue network, providing edge detection, enhanced personal thermal imaging, while simplifying post-scene reporting and data retention. One of the key parts of the Luna is their FAST system, the Firefighting Assisting Search Technology. This combines directional and distance information with thermal imaging to help find separated teammates and decrease response time. It actually connects you to the other crews in the vicinity for a unified search during the time of mutual aid by instantly notifying the network of Luna devices when there is a downed crew member, allowing for a prompt search and rescue. All of this then plugs into the FireGrid system for cloud-based connectivity, real-time information, and data-driven decisions for the incident commander. It enables you to see the exact location of your firefighters on the scene. And it doesn't require you to be sat on the station. The MSA Hub then provides a wireless gateway straight to the cloud, enabling wireless on-scene data for local and remote incident command for additional eyes on the scene. MSA are truly taking massive strides in the future of improved firefighter safety through connectivity. MSA is dedicated to increasing safety in the fire service through technological advancements. Various feature enhancements, new products, partnerships, and integrations will provide additional capabilities readily accessible by products, software, and services in the brand new MSA Connected Firefighter platform. Now back to the show.
But also about the culture, it's about making it really safe to make mistakes, to make failing something that is a learning opportunity. And until the culture becomes much more positive around that, it is really difficult to get feedback because straight away you feel like, oh, I've done something wrong. I've made a mistake.
I think we should deliver more courses on feedback. I use an SBI model. There's loads of models out there. Do you have any? Do you know the situation behavior impact one? I forget where I stole it from. It's not mine. Do you have any feedback models that you have in your head that you feel have worked? Because just getting started with uncomfortable conversations, and this is just one part of what we'll circle back to another aspect in a minute, but I just wonder if there's any more meat on this bone. And I know it's an entire conversation in itself, but having difficult conversations, there's some great books actually. Nonviolent Communications, one of my favorite books on this. Really, really good book. Do you have any things that you've found useful, tips, tricks, things you've seen modeled well by managers? Or
I think starting the conversation more openly, where you ask people to reflect on their own performance. And I know that doesn't work with everybody, but often people do know, if they struggle a bit with rapport, it might be something they do feel a bit awkward, or if they struggle with confrontation or having those difficult conversations, if you ask them, so how do you feel about that? How do you manage that? Is there anything about that you find difficult? If you sort of throw it back to the person, so it's not just, I'm here because I'm the expert and I'm telling you, it's about, well, let's find out what you think and let's see, have it more as a conversation. That
is really important. That's the difference between like a coach and a mentor. And this is where I think shadowing is so valuable as well. And it's something because we're diminishing in our resources and people and stuff like that. But following someone else for a day, and if that person is good self-awareness, being able, like if I came along with you for the day, like, Pete, shadow me for the day. I'll introduce you in meetings. You're not there to contribute, so just please take some notes because I'm going to ask you for some feedback after each session. And then you coming out of that and going, Pete, how do you feel that meeting went? How do you feel I showed up? What do you feel my level of engagement was? Is there any areas I went too far on, not far enough? Was there any way you thought I sort of challenged that I didn't challenge? And helping that person see your version of, if you were good, and your own personal opinion, if you were good in that environment, what you thought good looked like. Because it's a bit of a cocktail, isn't it? I always say a person's development is like 1,000 fingerprints. You want to pick up a little bit of everything. I'm not trying to be Hannah. I'd like to have a bit of Hannah in my personality and perhaps the way that I handle things. But I think that, and coaching and mentoring is difficult for people because they think sometimes it needs to be a formal thing, like your organization or your service says, we've chosen Hannah as your mentor. And you're like, I don't know if I want to be like Hannah. I don't know who's Hannah, Yeah,
I think having the more control you have, I think with mentoring relationships, most people have somebody who they look up to and think, yeah, I really like the way this person operates. I like what they do. I like their manner, their approach, being able to choose your own mentor and say, actually, I'd really like to work with that person, spend a bit of time with them. That can be much more helpful.
So one of the areas that you have a particular skill set for is, we're talking a little bit around the online assessment tools, certainly with fire and rescue and emergency services. I find this really fascinating, and I'd love if you could maybe walk me through the type of conversation you have with an organization. Because what I think I see in sort of the role that you do, and this is where, please correct me because I'll probably fumble my way through this, is people tell you what they think they want. So Hannah, I'm looking for this sort of person. And then you help them create ways in which to identify, highlight people with those particular skills. Can you walk me through how that looks? Because many people, including myself, will have experienced the end result of the work that you are part of and that you create and that you support organizations in creating. But I'd love to understand, and I'm sure many others would, how they get created. Ever heard the quote that true leaders are readers? Well, we believe this is true. Listeners often ask where we go to keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening in the sector globally. So there are a few key publications which I encourage you to go check out. Now, if you're looking for insights on disaster management, fire protection and firefighting, for us, we go to Asia Pacific Fire Magazine. And when you're looking for the latest on the Middle East fire protection industry and fire services, it's Gulf Fire Magazine. And our quarterly check-in is with International Firefighter Magazine, reporting to municipal, industrial and fire training professionals. Now, next up, and widely accepted to be the global voice for passive and active fire protection. This is a good one. It's International Fire Protection Magazine. And finally, and perhaps the most relevant to our predominantly UK audience, I'd strongly suggest subscribing to UK Fire Magazine, reporting to the United Kingdom fire protection industry and fire services. We're really excited to announce that after a long-standing relationship and mutual respect, we've now partnered with MDM Publishing, who bring you all of these essential publications. Because in a world of change, the learners shall inherit the earth, while the learned shall find themselves perfectly suited for a world that no longer exists. Eric Hoffer said that, and I believe he was right. So keep growing, keep learning, and keep yourself in the know and at the cutting edge of what's happening globally by dropping into the notes. And as a gift from the podcast, you can actually subscribe to any of these publications for free using the link in our notes. Now back to the show.
Yeah, so that's really good questions. So luckily, we've got a starting point with, you'll have a framework. So for instance, years ago, it was the PQAs, personal qualities and attributes. So that was your list almost of the behaviours. This is what good looks like. And then over time, it evolved because things have to change. And now we've got the leadership qualities framework. So it's not a question of an organisation saying, I want a person like this. It'll be, well, we've got the framework that's been agreed by the NFCC, and all the fire services have signed up to it, well, most of them. So that's a really clear framework, and it's really helpful to have a clear framework of behaviours, because it's almost like, this is what we need people more or less to look like in the fire service. And it's not that they all have to be complete clones, because there's a lot of variation in there how you demonstrate, but there's some really clear values and standards of what we're looking for, and it's all laid out. So straight away, you're kind of taking away the mystery. If somebody's going for a promotion and they know that the standard is the leadership, all in the leadership framework, that's something that they can look at and try and think about. Well, firstly, when you read it, you're going to think, well, that's just a whole load of words. I don't know what that means
can be
to
an
me,
interpretation,
or how that's relevant.
because perception is reality, and how you write it and how I read it can be very different. Why did we ever? Do you remember the Nolan principles? Have you ever familiar with them?
No, I'm starting to feel like you know more about psychology than I do.
No, not at all. So the Nolan principles are considered to be one of the foundations around how the emergency services was set up. They came up with the Nolan principles, and it was around selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, openness, honesty. And these are still what we hold, I believe, chief fire officers and people who hold public office. We hold them accountable to these aspects. And then when you do see different iterations of things, I think sometimes to myself, no one likes change for the sake of change. I like many aspects of the new NFCC's leadership framework, because it includes a lot of what, like we were talking about, feedback. There is an overwhelming sense that they want to encourage a cyclic sense of feedback in the development of their people, versus what used to feel more like you're being preached at like this is what you should be like. But I appreciate the original Erlang principles, again, might be hard for people to interpret. But sorry, we were talking about, the way that people interpret them, because some of the way that these things are written, if you're not used to reading this sort of stuff, and I certainly think about this with people first coming into the emergency services, and perhaps even people in direct entry, it's like, unless you're used to some of the vernacular, some of it's not massively digestible.
Yeah. And there's an exercise I used to do when I did some training courses on, and it was to do with the PQAs actually, but it's still competencies, it's still behaviours. And it's about getting somebody, say, a watch manager or a station manager, and say to them, can you think of something that either you or a member of your team have done that was really effective? Now, can you talk me through what that situation was, what you did, how you did it, what the impacts were, what the results were? So we just talk through, and it can be something operational, it can be something office-based, it's just something that they can think of that they think that worked really well. And then you can break down and say, okay, were any leadership qualities demonstrated in that? No, that's something completely different. That's a framework, that's separate. Well, actually, let's break that down. And you can just see about, well, so you talked about the way that communication was done. Okay, so that fits in with personal impact. And you're talking about how you were thinking about the community and how you were getting different opinions back from the community and how you were tailoring your service based on what people need. Okay, that's service delivery. The more you talk about it, the more you can break down. So in that one example that had nothing to do with the leadership framework, actually, you demonstrated this, and this.
You're so right. I always say to people, qualities. Like, parents are leaders. If you've got a child or a friend, you and your friend, you will unknowingly demonstrate so many leadership capabilities when you meet them and they're having a good day or a bad day, whatever it might be. But being able to articulate those things, I really worry how many people we lose because they struggle to articulate the thing they do so very well. And that probably leads me to the fact that when we're doing these assessments, and I suppose perhaps the beauty, and please correct me if I'm wrong, some of the stuff that you develop are online tools, which removes the possible human factor. Because what frustrates me, and I've mentioned it before on the podcast, I won't go too far into it, but interview skills. Like you're very articulate, you've got great interpersonal skills, but you've developed them and you've actually qualified yourself, you've studied psychology, and we have people sitting in interviews, interviewing people who can have very poor emotional intelligence. And a conversation, we have to at least take 50% responsibility for each of it. If I don't get out of you the thing I know that is within you, I've got to take ownership of some of the failing of that. And that, when you're in those times, I've had so many interviews, and I've failed so many interviews, and I'm like, it's a bit like I've got a bag behind me, and I'm asking you to describe to me what you want me to get out of the bag. It's in the bag. I've brought it all. What do you want? And I can't understand what it is you want me to get out of the bag. So I keep pulling random things out, and then if I fail, which I have many times, I'm like, that was in the bag. So I didn't understand that's what you wanted me to get out. And I know that will probably resonate with so many people listening. They're like, and how many times have you heard it? You're like, Sarah would be amazing in the fire service. My friend Jack would have been great as a paramedic, but he didn't get through. And you're like, that's got to, and I'm sure you hear it from leaders as well. We're like, we see amazing people every day. We just can't get them through the door. Yeah,
it's so frustrating. Because you shouldn't feel like that. A decent interview being done in the right way should not feel like you're just trying to second guess what the interviewer wants to hear. That's terrible.
but you know they've got the list. I've got the list. I'm looking for, wait. Yes, there it was. And that shouldn't be the case, because for me, like 70% of anything that your score should have been in like 360 feedback before that. You should know if I can already do the thing. We should have almost a portfolio of this individual which says, Hannah's at that place already. She's had these skill sets. She's had this feedback from the teams, wherever. Because a pure meritocracy is Hannah delivers. Hannah gets stuff done. But maybe nobody likes her. Maybe nobody likes working with Hannah. Maybe she's a dictator. But if we've already got all of those layers, I'm only looking for that 20% or 30% difference when we get to that interview. Like, there's a great book. I think it's Zappos. Delivering Happiness, I think the book is called. And part of their interview process, I don't know if you've read the book, it's about, there's two people that contribute like 60% of the marking criteria to whether someone gets selected. And those two people are the person that picks them up from the airport and the receptionist on the desk. Because that is how, and those people spend about between an hour and 30 minutes with them because they specifically make the person wait in reception for at least half an hour and interact with this individual. And it's about, you know, that what you're really like when you think no one's watching. That's what culture is. That's what you are like. And that adds up to a massive aspect of it. And I know, sorry, I'm digressing, but you know what I mean? Sometimes we turn up in an interview and I'm like, you don't really know me. You know the version of me that I've chosen to show you today. And that might sound very pessimistic, and we don't want that. But it's kind of like the second guessing, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's partly one of the reasons for the exercises that we use in our assessments, because it's a written exercise and then there's the role play. And in both situations, there's a lot of background information to take on board, and there's a task to achieve, and there's time pressure. I mean, everyone always talks about there's so much time pressure, you can't get it all done. No, you can't get it all done. You're not expected to get it all done. But that pressure means that you revert to type. You haven't got time to be thinking, well, what do they want?
Yes.
Or who do I need? It's just, I need to get this done. So you're just you and you get it done. And in a role play situation, beforehand, you'll think, this is just really fake. They're an actor. I'm going to have to pretend. And then you find yourself having a conversation like this and you just completely forget that it's a fake situation. Mm-hmm. So the assessments that we do them over Teams, and the person who's assessing is also the role player. So it's a psychologist. So they're in character. So they're having this conversation with somebody. So they know what they need to achieve. You know, the role player will be somebody who's struggling at work, or it'll be a really work relevant situation. And the person just gets into it. And it makes it much easier for us to give feedback then, because we're then able to say, in this situation, you did this really effectively, and this worked really well, and your impact was this and this. There were points where, and then we've got clear quotes, and you know, we can give really clear feedback, and it doesn't seem critical, because it'll just be, in this situation, you tended to say this and this, and in the workplace, the impact of that might be. So a way that you can get around that, or what you might want to consider doing, is something a little bit different. So we put all of this into the feedback report. So when somebody goes through the written exercise, the case study, and then they do the role play, at least they feel like whatever the outcome at the end of it, they've got some really decent feedback that they can take forward and work with.
If you're a regular listener to the podcast, then chances are you are big into your own personal development and the development of firefighters around you. So I wanted to remind you of our mobile app Drill Book. This is a free training and development resources made by firefighters for firefighters. Heading on to Drillbook, you will find incident debriefs, radio messages, knots and lines, quick reference guides, quizzes every single day. We've got useful links to the ERG, to Web Rescue, to JESU, Euro Rescue, 10-second triage, National Operational Guidance. You've got trauma skills sessions and questions in there with 10-second surveys, patient handovers, questioning, bleed controls, vitals, major incidents, and not to mention our daily quizzes where you will find questions on extrication, casualty handling, breathing apparatus, fire development, water rescue, rope rescue, you name it. It is the go-to resource if you've got a spare 5 minutes on the firehouse to develop yourself and those around you. Not only that, if you're looking to get into the fire service, we've got advice on there on interview questions, interview answers. You can build your own questioning in there. We've got radio messages apps where you can develop and put together your own methane, IFCO, and a whole area dedicated to knots and lines and incident debriefs as well. All of the incident debriefs that we have gone through on the podcast, you'll find them there. And again, remember, this is built by firefighters for firefighters. So you can add your own drills in there. You can pick the drills that you find the most favorite. When you go to search for different drills in there, you can find breathing apparatus, hazmat, incident command, ladder drills, pumping, RTC, trauma skills, winching and recovery, urban search and rescue, height rescue, water rescue. There is literally hundreds of training ideas, hundreds of drills in there. And you can continue to build this library of resource for yourself and for firefighters all around the world. Remember, this app is absolutely free and it grows every single day down to the contributions of our thousands and thousands of users. So if you've got that favorite training drill and you want to share it with somebody else, get in there. If you're looking for ideas for training yourself and your crews, get in there. It's freely available on Android, Apple, and you will find it in the links for this podcast. Remember, it's called personal development. The clue's in the name. You've got to work twice as hard on yourself as you do on the job. So always be growing, always be developing. Now let's get back to the show. I find that so valuable, because you're so right, and that what you just said there echoes back to that SPI model. It's factual. Situation, behavior, impact. This was exactly the situation. This is the behavior you exhibited. Either got it on film, or this is the quote. You said this. The impact of that was A, B, C, X, Y, Z. The impact was the bit outside of your control, but it was what you intended. Your intended impact versus the impact felt. Sorry, like the result of actually what happened. That for some people and for some organisations though, might seem like a very resource-heavy process. But I always think to myself, and I know we're both speaking here with the luxury that we don't run these multi-million pound, whatever, fire and rescue services or big organisations, but it's like, if I put Hannah in the wrong job, the organisational cost of that, hundreds of thousands. It's easy to put someone in a job, very hard to remove them from it. But I feel like with how much recruitment we're doing, how much accelerated development, how much people jumping through roles, ranks, levels, very difficult for people to justify in their minds, with their budgets, with their ever-pressing time constraints, putting that time into doing something like that. Because you're absolutely right, the role-based stuff I find is so effective, because you can sit and say, oh, how would you deal with this, Hannah? And you'll go, oh, I'd be very professional. I'd be really honest. I'd be so in control of it. I'd follow the policy. Yeah. But if we go, right, we're going to do role play now. And so Pete's come in. He's just had a difficult exchange with someone outside, and he comes in and goes, Hannah, I'm fucking sick of so-and-so. Yeah, I've had enough of this shit. You know what? I've told you about this 3 times. I feel like you've done nothing about it. And to be honest, I think you're incompetent. I'm really sick of it. And I'm leaving or whatever. Do you know what I mean? That's real. If you can immerse yourself, I apologize for my language, but if you can immerse yourself in that, it's like, deal with it. Because that's reality. That's what happens. That's what I've had. Yeah. Well, not that exactly, but like, that's people's emotions. That's what happens. So-and-so's just said that. You need to do something about it now. It's real.
And in that situation, if somebody really struggles, then it's going to be disappointing if they don't get the promotion that they were looking for. But realistically, if they're going to struggle with that sort of scenario, then they're going to struggle in the role. So it's not that they're not ready ever. They're just not ready now. So you can really pinpoint. So you need some development around that. You need some training about some skills and strategies. So eventually it become more natural. But to start off with, you need to have a few go-to strategies of how you deal with that sort of interaction to make it feel a bit more comfortable and easier, and then you gain the experience, and then you're more comfortable to be able to do that actually in the role. But going back to what you said about the resources, for something like this assessment that we've designed, it's 2 hours for a candidate to come in and do a case study and then do a role play. It's less than 2 hours back to back, and because all of the assessments are done by our team, occupational psychologists, we do it all the time. So instead of getting group managers and station managers, pulling them away from their jobs, getting them in, they've not done any sort of assessment or interviewing for a year, they've sort of forgotten how to do it, they've got a million emails piling up, and they're having to do, it's none of that, because this is what we do all the time. So we can do the assessments really effectively, really efficiently and quickly, and we can just manage the whole thing. So instead of whole departments getting taken out, you're not going to get any emails from HR or recruitment for the next 6 weeks because they are stuck into a campaign and nobody's got any time to do anything else. It's just, let us know when you need to do an assessment, for promotion or recruitment, and we'll handle that. And then we'll assess everybody completely objectively, and then in a couple of weeks' time, we'll send you a list of results and the feedback reports. And then you can do what you do best, which is actually training and developing and working with people.
That bit you mentioned there. So I do work with assessment organisations, travelling across the UK, assessing different fire services in different things. And it was a real eye-opening process for me, because whilst people may not think this relates directly, it does, and give me a moment, is like when you're entering adult education, and when you're entering any kind of assessment, when you talk to people like Ofqual and stuff like this, I know this might not seem the same, because it's not an educational assessment, but it's an assessment. It's an assessment of types for promotion, for development. And what I'm trying to say is it needs to be transparent, needs to be fair, needs to be standardized. And this is the things that I'm hearing when you're speaking then, because it's like, otherwise, because then you set yourself up for a myriad of complaints, of grievances, because it's like, well, you had Sam assess me. Sam's not done an assessment in 10 years. Yeah, he's just been off sick for 2 years. Yeah, show me when he did his interview training, and. Do you know what I mean? And unfortunately, some of that will hold weight, and it's that people will have a fair standing to, even if they don't get a successful grievance, they will still feel they've been unfairly treated. I wasn't given the same opportunity, and also, who are you to assess me? Whereas when you, like you say, occupational psychologists, they're trained to do this thing. It's tested, it's standardized, it's cost effective, it's impartial. It's these people don't have an emotional career investment in, I need to get Hannah through because she's my mate, or anything like that. It really seems like a tremendous effective way of going about it. So when we're talking about this, career progression gateway is one of the great systems that I've seen for online assessment processes that you've developed. Could you take us through a couple of ways in which this could be? I know we may have spoken a little bit around them already, but ways in which these are applied, and some of the answers or challenges it helps organizations find solutions to. Today's podcast is powered by our partner Lifelines and their revolutionary approach to functional hydration. Just like in firefighting, water is essential for body function, but studies show more than 80% of firefighters are dehydrated. A 25-year study findings from the National Institute of Health showed poor hydration to be linked to early aging and chronic disease, and even mild dehydration results in significant negative impact outcomes, including headaches, exhaustion, rapid pulse, irritability, and poor cognitive function. A study conducted by Yale University showed that participants who were just 1% dehydrated had a 12% increase in errors when performing tasks that required cognitive flexibility. In addition, dehydration is shown to worsen mood and attitude, contribute to confusion and poor decision making, and negatively affect memory and judgment. In other words, you really don't want your incident commander, firefighter, or for that matter any first responder on a critical scene to be even slightly dehydrated. Mild dehydration occurs when a person is just 1.5% dehydrated, a condition that does not even trigger the thirst response in most people. So just imagine how quickly a firefighter or any first responder can and does become dehydrated in their day-to-day duties, which is why I address my hydration first thing every day with Lifelines. Go into the notes for this episode and specifically check out Lifelines Hydro Fuel and Hydro OG by clicking in the notes for the podcast for a clean energy solution designed for those who demand more from their day. Now back to the show.
Yeah, so we've got a few different clients who use it, and that's really useful because it means that you have firefighters at all levels being assessed in the same way against the same criteria using the same exercises. So you've got a nice amount of standardization there, which means we can do things like we can have a look at the data and we can see high potential accelerated progression, for instance. We've got lots of data that will help us. We're able to say, well, if you're getting somebody above this sort of score, then the chances are, because and we've got enough data over enough years that we can say, well, they've actually operated at the same level in these assessments at crew, watch, station, so there's a good chance that this person is going to be really suitable for further progression. So it's really nice gathering all that data from across all different organizations. But if I take one, an example, so for instance, this month, let me have a look at my board. So we've got a group manager process. So we usually have projects for about between 6 and 8 candidates, because at group manager level, that's sort of how many you get. And then we will assess those in the case study and the role play. And then we'll provide the results to the client. So that will be in rank order. It will be a percentage score that is an aggregate of the two different exercises. Okay. And then the fire service can then decide what to do. So sometimes it depends in different services. Some services will then identify, so the top people in that list, they will say, okay, so we can go on and develop those further, or it might be they've already done their development and then it's an interview to put them in different roles. It really varies. So I wanted it to be really consistent. So whether you're going for a crew manager role, whether you're going for an area manager role, you know that you're going to do a case study. You know that you're going to do a one-to-one role play. You know it's going to take around 2 hours. You know that the feedback report's going to be the same. The pre-information, we've got an e-learning course that's all going to be consistent. So, because sometimes it's really confusing that processes are changing all the time and people never quite know what to expect. And you don't want anything to make someone feel uncomfortable. The best situation to be in is that they're going for their promotion, they're feeling like they've done all the prep that they need to do, they know what's coming up, and they just feel like they're going to be able to give it their very best shot, because that's what we want to see. We want to see them doing their very best. So the exercises then at crew, watch, station and group manager level are set in a fictitious fire service. So that's because it just feels more relatable, it feels more comfortable for someone to sit down, start reading information, and it's in a context that they're familiar with. So
do you think it was too much of a cognitive leap for people to, because we used to have ones where you're managing an airport, you're managing a leisure centre, you're doing, and for some people they were like, oh, what's that got to do with the fire service? And I'm like, a lot, because it could be managing a factory, like, and this is a wonderful example with the direct entry stuff. It's like loads of these are transferable skills, you know, but some people you kind of need to, or it looks like it's more beneficial for them if you create a similar environment.
Yeah. And, you know, people were saying, I'm not comfortable with the airport and the leisure centre and it puts me off. Fine. So we'll put it in a fire service context. So we do that all the way up to area manager level. But at area manager, it is an external, fictitious, parallel type organisation, just because, you know, it's just more appropriate at that level to not have it set in fire service. You don't want people falling back on what they've learned, their policy, procedure. You need to see behaviours, not knowledge.
Yes, that's a great point, actually. And again, I keep thinking like direct entry, otherwise you just fall back on your isms. You fall back on your comfortable ground, and you can end up talking to me 40 minutes about you used to be a breathing apparatus instructor. Completely bloody irrelevant at this level. You spoke about bespoke tailoring for contextual fit for different organisations. So when we talk about that direct entry stuff, have you had much involvement in how we are looking at the processes for external candidates? Because we are finding that, we spoke earlier around like a crew manager. Crew manager is a fantastic crew manager. If you're a fantastic crew manager, you should probably stay a crew manager your entire life, because that might be the place that you are best suited. Now that will be perpetually frustrating for someone that desperately wants to develop themselves financially. Maybe they want a bit more money, and that might not be a solution for them if they don't have the skill sets to move into higher level roles. But when we look at something like direct entry, when we're looking for a certain skill sets that's coming in at that level, but again, removing the sort of nepotism of you don't come from this type of organization historically, how do we identify people externally and bring them into these sorts of roles?
Well, the same way. I mean, if we talk about that crew manager just quickly, before we talk about direct entry, for that crew manager who wants to progress and she hasn't got the skills right now, so it's frustrating. That's not to say they should give up on that. It's just they'll need some development. They'll just need to put in, and it might be quite a lot of effort. But I know a lot of firefighters are really focused on their development, and there's a lot of really positive attitudes towards growth and development, which is always really lovely to see. So it's never say never. They might not have the skills now, but with the right support, then they could get there. And the thing is, with the direct entry, we assess them in the same way. So we took the station manager level CPG exercises, which are measured against the leadership behaviours. So again, we're just looking at key behaviours that we want to see to match with the values and the standards and the mission of the organisation. And we assessed external applicants against that, doing the same exercise as station managers do. And we got really similar results.
I find that fascinating. The cost aspect of it I find huge as well. I'm looking on your LinkedIn page, and we'll link this for people that can go and have a look at it. The cost saving as well as the end result feeling for the individual seems to be enormous. You've got a quote on there that the CPG process saved a recent client £34,800 for one process. That's £600 per candidate. That is colossal. And when I think about the number of processes that's being carried out across the UK Fire and Rescue Service now, this is some incredibly low-hanging fruit. What do you think? Because you work with, I think, 11 to 13 UK Fire and Rescue Service, so there's a lot of other opportunity out there. If I asked you to speak to the people that are reluctant, the services that are stuck in a different mindset, that struggle to see how this is applicable, what would be your elevator pitch to them to help them understand how this is a valid, beneficial, cost-saving, fair, transparent solution? Because I feel like the growth potential for what you and your team are doing is just colossal, and I want to try and help those that don't understand it or are reluctant to it to understand why it's something that could be so beneficial for them.
Yeah, I mean, that is the holy grail. If I had that elevator pitch and that I could just go to all of those reluctant fire services and come out with that in a convincing way.
Would you want to though? Because you might end up, we said before we came on, sometimes you find a solution and it grows arms and legs and starts chasing you. Because I imagine you and your team are getting very, very busy.
We have got quite a few clients, and the ones that we work with are really loyal to the product, and they can see the value, and they really enjoy the fact that they just don't have to put the resources into it. You know, it frees up their teams.
It's like a self-perpetuating cycle as well, because I imagine the more they use it, the better it gets, because the more data you have.
Yeah, exactly. And the more that candidates know that they've got, you know, they'll do the e-learning course, so all of their questions are answered up front. And then we always get feedback from them, so we know that they're mostly very happy with the process. It reduces grievances because there isn't really anything to complain about, because it's fair and objective. You've got psychologists doing all the assessments. They get really full feedback at the end of it. They get a chance of having a feedback session with one of our team. I do quite a lot of those where we talk about what their aspirations are, where they feel their strengths are, what the development areas and their feedback, you know, what can we do what can they do, talk to their line manager, how, you know, real practical ways that they can move forward. So it does just reduce a lot of the complaints. It reduces a lot of the uncertainty. From the organisation's point of view, it's identifying the people who need to be in that position to progress. So, you know, there's all of those wider impacts on organisational function and efficiency. But from a people perspective, it is helping with that morale issue of going for a promotion, not getting it, feeling really fed up, going back on the watch, complaining to everybody about that, you know, lowers morale generally. It's just making the whole thing a lot more collaborative.
Yeah. I want to be really respectful of your time, but I'd be remiss if we didn't cover a little bit of an aspect around, I imagine this is taking up most of the time of what you do now, but you do a lot of work around career coaching and CV support as well. And I don't know how much you're able to apply time to that anymore, but I think for people that are transitioning in their jobs, people again, not direct entry or anything like that, but people in their 30s, 40s, 50s who are looking for a career change. Past COVID, we saw a lot of people change careers, particularly for people that feel like they've perhaps got stagnant. When we're talking about things like career coaching and CV support, what are some of the low-hanging fruit that you help people with and that perhaps they could ponder on as they come away from this conversation today, to think about ways they could develop themselves professionally, ways they could develop themselves personally, and the world of a CV? Do they still exist? How useful do you see them as an occupational psychologist, as someone involved in a lot of these processes? Is that a place for people to place their focus still?
I think CVs are used outside of the fire service and the emergency service sector, not so much. So that's something that we do outside of the fire service. And yeah, there's some really easy ways you can make your CV an awful lot better. Most people write a CV so it looks like a job description. It's just a list of tasks and they don't put themselves in it at all. So it all comes back down to this evidence. You know, with all the assessments we do, we're looking for evidence. We're looking for the person to demonstrate evidence of what their behaviours are in the workplace. And it's the same thing with a CV. Put some evidence down. Don't just say you're motivated and, you know, highly conscientious and brilliant at customer service, for instance. Put an example in. Explain a situation of where you've done that really effectively. It just stands out a lot more because most CVs are really bland. And
how long should a good CV be?
So if you get one,
because I'm sure, as is evident,
no more
with
than
the
2
podcast,
pages.
2 pages. I struggle with brevity. So anything that says 250
2 pages,
words,
the rest won't be read.
Okay.
They won't read it. You'll get binned.
That must be so difficult, especially with some people that have done so much in their career. Again, people who are midlife or beyond, they feel like they've got a lot of accomplishments. They want to list a load of outcomes on there. And this can, again, be something that when you sat in an interview, you're just waffling off metrics of success, and perhaps you don't get the behaviors in there.
You just need to prioritize what are the things that you feel are most important to get across, because those are the things that motivate you, that you're really passionate about, and that you actually want to do more of in your career. Because when people are thinking about changing career, sometimes they can just take very practical choices about, well, I should do this because I know I've done this before, and actually, I've got lots of experience of this. It's like, yes, but where do your skills lie? What actually are you very good at bias, naturally?
Gamblers have it where you've put 10 grand on a table and you want to keep playing to get it back. Someone's like, well, I've been an accountant for 15 years. I can't change careers now. I need to keep doing accountancy. Whereas your skill set and your personal preferences may have changed, but it's so hard to step away from something. And again, people in the emergency services, it's so much of their identity. To even consider doing something else is very hard for some of them, I think.
Yeah, but there comes a point fairly early on in a lot of people's fire service careers where they do have the opportunity to think about that. I talk to a lot of people who are retiring in their late 40s or early 50s. So either they can just retire at that point, but for a lot of people, they want to carry on and do something else. But it's just finding out. It's just really exciting, finding out what you love doing and what you're good at doing. Often those things are tied, they go hand in hand. And so how can we capitalize on that? And it's not throwing away all those years of experience. It's trying to think about how can we just tailor that in a way that, you're still using the things that you've shown that you're good at in the past, but also building in those things that you can get really excited about.
When, to close, I wanted to ask you around career coaching. So coaching can be a little bit of the Wild West, with the greatest of respect, from my personal experience. It's there's a lot of people out there who don't have formal training and qualifications such as yourself that are doing a lot of quote bar coaching. What should people look for in a coach? What are some of the principles you should expect from a good coach? What's some good principles of a coaching relationship?
I think a lot of it is about the rapport. It's about that relationship, because a coach does have some challenging conversations with you. So it needs to be a relationship where you trust in that, and you're not going to find yourself feeling very defensive or got at by being challenged. And the challenge is often gentle, but it's there because there are often things that we don't want to address, or there's elephants in the room that a coach really should be kind of highlighting and just saying, I think there's something we're not talking about. Is there something that you like? Is there something that you could bring up, or are you aware? Most people know what the thing is, or it'd be something that's holding them back, a lack of confidence that comes from something that happened in the past. So it's kind of digging into those things. So you just need to be able to trust that the person has your best interests at heart, and that relationship just feels very safe.
Should this always be someone from within your current sphere of connection? Because again, echoing back to the direct entry, and that's not a perfect process by any stretch of the imagination, but what I do like about their model is they have given individuals mentors and or coaches outside of their own organizations. And whilst that's been formally arranged for them, would you encourage people to look for similar? Should they reach outside of their current sphere? Should we reach outside of our own sector? Because we can be screaming into an echo chamber sometimes, surrounded by people that think the same as us and have done a career very similar to us in a similar place.
Yeah, there's definitely benefits to that, but I think it just depends on a case-by-case basis what it is that the individual's looking for. Because often you can say, oh, well, it's important to have a coach, get a coaching relationship established. For what purpose? What are you trying to achieve? So it really depends on what you're looking for from that relationship.
Wonderful. Anna, thank you so much for your time today. Before we wrap it up, where can people find you for all of those organizations that are perhaps yet to benefit from doing work with you and your team? Where's the best place for them to come and find some more information, and what links should we include underneath for people to get in contact if they want to?
So probably the best place, the easiest place, is through our website. So that's vcaltd.co.uk, and there's different contact boxes and loads of information on there. So yeah, that would be as good a place as any.
Perfect. We'll drop that in the notes below, and thanks so much for your time this morning. I really appreciate it.
Okay, great.
The Firefighters Podcast was created to recognize, acknowledge, inspire, and hopefully even motivate these incredible individuals who have chosen to be part of the first responder community. Our driving purpose is to create a legacy resource for the current and future generations of firefighters and first responders. We get some incredible feedback from listeners and guests, and as the podcast grows, our desire to create longevity and sustainability means that we are asking for the support of our listeners. If you want to support the podcast, if you want to get discounts to our merchandise, hoodies, clothing, coins, patches, tallies, and also access to all of the incredible documents that get shared with us from our podcast guests and sector leaders, then please head over to our Patreon page, and for just £3 a month, you can support the future of the podcast. Please finally hit that follow, subscribe, or rate button on the platform you're listening, and wherever you're in the world, please support your emergency services responders, and thank you for listening.